The shrill alarm blared through the corridors of the Stellar Accord. Captain Elena Drake moved briskly toward the brig, her polished boots echoing sharply against the metal floors. Behind her, Commander Rhea Song struggled to keep pace, a data pad clutched tightly in her hands. "Remind me," Elena said without looking back, "why we thought sheltering an alien fugitive from the most powerful empire in the galaxy was a good idea." "He came to us," Rhea replied, slightly out of breath. "And he's not just any fugitive. If what he says about the Empire is true, this could change everything. Or end everything," Elena muttered as she rounded the corner. Inside the brig, the air was heavy with tension. A faint hum from the containment field separated Elena from her controversial guest, Kivin Czar, the so-called alien king. His tall, sinewy frame sat poised on the edge of the cot, a hint of defiance in his violet eyes. "Captain Drake," Kivin greeted her with a nod, his deep voice resonating with an unshakable calm. "I assume the Empire has contacted you." "Oh, they've done more than that," Elena said sharply. "They've sent a fleet to blockade this neutral zone and are demanding your immediate surrender. Care to explain why I'm suddenly public enemy number one?" Kivin leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Because I am a threat to their power. The evidence I carry could unravel the very foundation of their empire." "Evidence that's still conveniently locked away," Elena countered, crossing her arms. "How do I know you're not just stalling for time?" Before Kivin could answer, the comm panel in the corner of the room flickered to life, projecting a hologram of High Chancellor Axervaltis. The Chancellor's face was angular, his golden robes radiating an aura of authority. "Captain Drake," he began, his voice smooth yet menacing, "you are harboring a criminal of the highest order. Return him to us immediately, or your fledgling species will suffer the consequences of your defiance." Elena stood her ground. "This criminal claims to have evidence that implicates your empire in atrocities across the galaxy. Care to comment?" Axis' lips curled into a thin smile. "Captain, you tread dangerous waters. Surrender Kivin Czar, and this matter can end without bloodshed. Refuse, and Earth will learn the cost of arrogance." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving a charged silence in its wake. "Well," Elena said after a moment, turning back to Kivin, "that's reassuring." "He's bluffing," Kivin replied, his voice steady. "The Empire doesn't want war with Earth, not yet. They'll try to intimidate you, but they can't afford to act without risking their own secrets being exposed." "Maybe," Elena said, her tone skeptical. "But I'm not gambling billions of lives on a maybe." Back on the bridge, the mood was equally grim. The ship's senior officers gathered around the central console, reviewing the latest intelligence. A holomap displayed the Imperial blockade, a wall of warships looming just beyond the neutral zone. "We're outmatched in every conceivable way," Commander Rhea began. "Even with the Alliance's support, we're not equipped to take on the Empire directly." "Then we don't," Elena said firmly. "Our best option is to buy time. Kivin's evidence could be the key to shifting the galactic balance, but it's worthless if we don't survive long enough to decrypt it." Dax Moran, the ship's grizzled security chief, leaned forward. "And what if he's lying? What if he's playing us?" "Then we lose nothing by keeping him alive," Elena replied. "Handing him over guarantees the Empire wins. Keeping him here gives us a chance, however slim, to turn the tables." The discussion was cut short by a sudden flicker of lights. The bridge's consoles dimmed, and a low rumble coursed through the ship. "Report!" Elena barked. "Power fluctuation in the main systems," Rhea said, her fingers flying across the console. "It's localized, but we're vulnerable to a boarding attempt if this isn't resolved quickly." Elena raced back toward the brig with Dax at her side, her mind racing through contingency plans. By the time they arrived, the containment field was flickering, its usual steady glow now erratic. "Sabotage," Dax muttered, scanning the scene. "Someone's trying to take him." "No kidding," Elena snapped, pulling her sidearm. The attack came swiftly. A section of the wall exploded inward, sending a shower of sparks and debris across the room. Imperial operatives clad in dark armor poured through the breach, weapons drawn. "Hold the line!" Dax shouted, returning fire as Elena pulled Kivin behind cover. The firefight was brutal. Elena's crew fought valiantly, using the confined space to their advantage, but the operatives were well-trained and relentless. "Captain," Kivin said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "You need me alive? Let me help." Elena hesitated, her grip tightening on her weapon. Then, with a sharp nod, she handed him a discarded sidearm. "Stay behind me. And don't make me regret this." Together, they pushed back against the attackers. Kivin's precision was uncanny, each shot finding its mark with surgical efficiency. When the last operative fell, Elena slumped against the wall, her breathing ragged. The room was a mess of smoke and scorched metal, but the immediate threat had passed. "That's one way to break the ice," Kivin said, handing the weapon back to Elena. She gave him a sharp look. "Don't get comfortable. This doesn't mean I trust you." Dax approached, his armor scorched but intact. "We've secured the area, but we've got bigger problems. The Empire knows exactly where we are, and they're not going to stop." Elena nodded grimly. "Then we don't stop either. Get that evidence decrypted. Whatever happens next, we need every advantage we can get." As the team regrouped, Elena felt the weight of the decisions ahead. They were playing a dangerous game with impossibly high stakes, and the clock was ticking. For now, survival was enough. Tomorrow, they'd worry about winning. The tension in the Stellar Accord-S command room was palpable. Captain Elena Drake leaned over the central console, her sharp gaze fixed on the holomap displaying the Imperial blockade. A ring of gleaming warships hovered just beyond the neutral zone, their weapons trained ominously on the Earth Alliance vessel. "Status report," she ordered, her tone crisp. Commander Rhea Song didn't look up from her station. "We've stabilized power in most systems, but the sabotage left gaps in our shields. We're vulnerable if they launch an assault. Then we'd better make sure they don't," Elena replied, straightening. "Open a secure channel to the Imperial flagship." Moments later, the towering figure of High Chancellor Axa Valtis flickered into view. His golden robes shimmered in the projection, but it was his cold, calculating eyes that commanded attention. "Captain Drake," he began with a condescending smile. "Have you come to your senses, or is this another display of human obstinance?" Elena stepped forward, her voice steady. "We're prepared to discuss terms. But before we begin, I need assurances. The safety of my crew and ship must be guaranteed." Axa's smile widened. "A reasonable request, though your position hardly warrants demands." "Proceed." "I want to know why you're so desperate to retrieve Kivin Tsar," Elena said, folding her arms. "If he's the criminal you claim, why not simply discredit him? What are you afraid he'll reveal?" Axa's expression hardened, the charm slipping for a fraction of a second. "Kivin Tsar is a destabilizing force, a rogue element intent on spreading lies and inciting rebellion. His capture is essential to maintaining galactic order." "Order for whom?" Elena countered. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're afraid of what happens when the truth gets out." Axa's smile returned, but his eyes were like ice. "Your bravado is impressive, Captain, but misplaced. Surrender Kivin within 6 hours, or the consequences will be swift and severe." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the room in heavy silence. In the strategy room, Elena gathered her senior officers. The table was cluttered with schematics, data pads, and an empty coffee cup someone had forgotten to clear away. "This isn't just about Kivin," Elena began, her voice low but firm. "The Empire wouldn't mobilize this kind of force unless he had something that could hurt them. Whatever he knows, we need it decrypted, fast." Rhea adjusted her glasses. "We've made progress. The data is heavily encrypted, but our systems are starting to crack it. We've already uncovered fragments mentioning an Orion directive, though the details are still unclear." Elena turned to Dax Moran, who was cleaning his sidearm with meticulous care. "What about the saboteurs?" "We've identified 3, Dax said gruffly. "Imperial operatives posing as neutral envoys. They didn't survive the attack, but there could be more. I've doubled security patrols, and we're sweeping the ship for any remaining threats. Good, Elena said. But we can't just play defense. If Axel thinks we're weak, he'll push harder. We need to show him we're not afraid to fight back. Later that evening, Elena found herself in the ship's observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. She barely noticed Kivin approaching until his reflection appeared in the glass beside her. You seem troubled, Captain, he said, his tone calm but probing. I'm responsible for this crew, Elena replied without turning. Every life on this ship depends on the choices I make. And right now, I'm out of good options. You're doing better than you think, Kivin said. The fact that Axel is negotiating with you at all speaks volumes. He's not used to anyone standing up to him. Elena glanced at him, her expression skeptical. And what about you? What's your endgame in all this? Kivin met her gaze evenly. I want to see the Empire dismantled. They've ruled through fear and oppression for too long. The evidence I carry could unite the factions they've wronged and bring about real change. And what if you're wrong? Elena asked. What if this just sparks more chaos and war? Then at least it will be an honest fight, Kivin said quietly. Not the slow suffocation of countless worlds under their rule. The negotiations resumed the following day, but this time, Elena had a plan. As the holographic image of Axel filled the command room, she stood tall, her expression unreadable. Chancellor, she began, I've reviewed your ultimatum, and I have a counterproposal. Axel arched an eyebrow, his interest piqued. By all means, enlighten me. Kivin remains in our custody, Elena said. But we'll share the evidence he's provided with the Galactic Council. If it supports your claims, we'll consider extradition. If not, he remains under our protection. Axel's smile was thin and humorless. You must think yourself very clever, Captain, but your terms are unacceptable. Kivin Czar is a threat to stability, and his presence with you only exacerbates the situation. That's not a no, Elena said, allowing a faint smile to tug at her lips. Which means you're not as confident as you pretend to be. If you were, you'd have fired on us already. Axel's expression darkened, but he said nothing. As the negotiation dragged on, a sudden alarm jolted the room. Captain? Rhea called from her station. Imperial operatives are attempting to breach the outer hull. They're targeting engineering. Dax, take a team and intercept, Elena ordered, her voice sharp. Rhea, maintain the connection with Axel. I'll handle this personally if I have to. The room erupted into coordinated chaos. Dax and his security team rushed to confront the attackers, while Elena worked to keep Axel distracted. You seem flustered, Captain, Axel said, a smirk playing on his lips. Just dealing with your lackeys, Elena shot back. You really should train them better. They're not making it easy to take you seriously. The jab was a calculated risk, but it worked. Axel's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of irritation. The firefight in engineering was swift and brutal. Dax's team managed to repel the operatives, but not before sustaining heavy damage to the ship's propulsion systems. They didn't come to disable us, Dax reported grimly. They came to send a message. And the message is clear, Elena said, her jaw set. They're not backing down. As the crew worked to repair the damage, Rhea brought Elena a new report. The decryption is complete, she said, handing over a data pad. You're going to want to see this. Elena scanned the contents, her expression growing darker with every word. The Orion Directive. It's worse than we thought. Axis planning a full-scale invasion of Earth. The realization hit like a physical blow. The evidence Kivin had risked everything to deliver was damning, but now, they had to decide how to use it. Elena turned to her team, determination blazing in her eyes. We have what we need. It's time to turn the tables. The decryption report sat heavily on Captain Elena Drake's desk, its glowing text casting long shadows across her quarters. Every word on the screen underscored the gravity of her dilemma. The Orion Directive wasn't just a threat to Earth, it was a blueprint for its systematic destruction. Elena's gaze lingered on the lines of code before her. She'd always known humanity's position in the galactic hierarchy was precarious, but this? This was annihilation masquerading as policy. A knock at her door broke her thoughts. "Come in," she said, her voice steady but laced with tension. Commander Rhea Song stepped inside, clutching her ever-present data pad. "The Council of Senior Officers is ready for you, Captain." Elena nodded, standing. "Let's hope we still have a ship by the time we're done deciding its fate." The conference room was abuzz with quiet urgency. Elena's senior officers sat around the table, their expressions ranging from grim determination to barely concealed worry. Security Chief Dax Moran was the first to speak. "We can't keep dancing around this," Dax said, his voice as blunt as his demeanor. "The Empire isn't bluffing. If we don't act decisively, they'll crush us. We have evidence now," Rhea countered, gesturing to the holo display. "This Orion directive could expose their plans to the Galactic Council. We might not need to fight if we play our cards right." "And what makes you think the Council will act?" Dax shot back. "Most of them are too scared of the Empire to lift a finger." Elena raised a hand, silencing the growing debate. "Enough. We need options, not arguments." Kivin Czar, seated at the far end of the table, finally spoke. "There's another path," he said, his deep voice cutting through the tension. "Use the directive as leverage. Present it to Axer and force him to withdraw." "Risky," Elena replied, her tone measured. "He might just call our bluff and attack anyway." "True," Kivin conceded. "But it's a calculated risk. The directive doesn't just implicate the Empire, it reveals their plans to betray their allies. If the factions currently propping them up knew what we know, they'd turn against the Empire." Rhea finished, her eyes widening. "It could work." Dax frowned. "Or it could get us all killed." Elena took a deep breath, leaning forward. "We've been reacting this whole time, dodging blows, patching leaks. It's time to take the initiative. We're sending this evidence to the Council, but first, we confront Axer directly." The neutral platform chosen for the meeting was a relic of an older, more hopeful era. Built during the formation of the Galactic Alliance, it was designed as a space for diplomacy and resolution, a dream long since overshadowed by the Empire's dominance. Elena stood in the sterile docking bay, her uniform crisp, her resolve sharper. Behind her, a small contingent of her crew awaited orders. Kivin stood at her side, his regal bearing undiminished despite the stakes. "Last chance to back out," Elena said quietly. Kivin smirked faintly. "I've already lost everything, Captain. What more can they take?" Moments later, the Imperial delegation arrived. High Chancellor Axel Valta stepped forward, flanked by guards in polished armor. His golden robes seemed to radiate confidence, but Elena saw the flicker of calculation in his eyes. "Captain Drake," Axel began, his tone smooth as silk. "You've certainly made this more interesting than anticipated." "Happy to disappoint," Elena replied, her voice even. Axel's gaze shifted to Kivin, his smile sharpening. "And the prodigal king returns. You've always been a thorn in my side, Kivin. But this time, you've overplayed your hand." "We'll see about that," Kivin said coolly. Elena cut in. "Let's skip the posturing. You know what we have." She gestured to the data pad in her hand. "The Orion Directive. Full schematics, deployment schedules, and, most damning, evidence of your betrayal of the Zvar coalition." Axer's smile faltered, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "I see you've been busy. But even with that, do you truly think you can outmaneuver the Empire?" "You're not as untouchable as you think," Elena replied. "Once this reaches the Council, your allies will turn on you. And without them, you're vulnerable." Axel stepped closer, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. "You're bluffing," he said softly. Elena met his gaze without flinching. "Try me." The room fell into tense silence. For a moment, it seemed as though Axel might call her bluff, his hand hovering near his communicator. But then, slowly, he stepped back. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice tight. Kivin stays under our protection, Elena said. You lift the blockade and withdraw your fleet. And you cease all plans against Earth immediately. Axa laughed coldly. Bold demands for such a small player on the galactic stage. Small players, Elena said, can make the biggest noise. Back aboard the Stellar Accord, Elena watched the Imperial fleet slowly withdraw from the neutral zone. The gamble had worked, for now. In the briefing room, her officers gathered once more. Dax leaned back in his chair, his expression grudgingly impressed. I'll admit, Captain, I didn't think you had it in you to stare down Axa like that. Elena smiled faintly. Neither did I. But this isn't over. Axa's retreat is temporary. He'll come back, and next time, he won't be so cautious. We'll be ready, Rhea said firmly. Kivin stepped forward. The evidence we've sent to the Council will take time to ripple through the galaxy, but when it does, the Empire will be forced to face consequences. Until then, your people must prepare. We will, Elena promised. And you're part of that preparation now. Like it or not, we're in this together. As the meeting adjourned, Elena lingered, staring out at the stars. The decision she'd made today would echo far beyond this moment, shaping not just Earth's future but the fate of countless worlds. The stakes had never been higher, but for the first time, Elena felt the stirrings of hope.